Hey athletes, Coach John Ferry here with you for the Week 3 athlete briefing for the 2023 Winter Run Challenge. Nice as always to be here with you on Friday evening. So before we jump into the workouts in the week ahead, let's do a Week 2 review. So we started the week with our 30-minute interval run. We spent a lot of time warming our body up, getting ready to work at a pretty high level. Then we hit that 4x30, then 4x45 at our anaerobic capacity intervals. Once again, working at a very high level, doing fast-paced intervals. So in addition to working at that anaerobic capacity energy zone, we're also working on running form and efficiency through the repetition of these high-paced intervals. That's sort of the baked-in secret sauce that comes with these workouts. Then we move on to our 30-minute hill workout, our second key run of the week. So a 15-minute main set this time. We did our 4x30 seconds at threshold, followed by our 5x1 minute. So it's starting to get quite a bit of time, not only operating that threshold and at that threshold pace, probably operating a little bit above threshold energy zone due to that resistance, but we're also working power generation, once again, running form and economy, and that's coming in the body of this hill workout. So a 30-minute hill session, our second key workout of the week. And then finally, our third key session of the week for everybody, our 45-minute easy run. So this is the cake part of the week, nice and easy. Dial the pace back, have a lot of fun with it. Those are our 3 key week 2 workouts. So just a reminder, per always, make sure as you're completing these workouts, as you're coming to the conclusion of your week 2, go into the website, check the box, say that I've done these workouts for this week, because remember, a 100% completion percentage is an absolutely amazing goal to have over the scope of this challenge, and is the best way to make sure you're moving that needle forward on a challenge by challenge basis. So go in, check that box, and get credit for doing your workouts. Now to our week 3 workouts. So run number 1, once again, 30-minute interval run. So these are once again our anaerobic capacity intervals, and this will be another progression of those AC intervals. We're going to call them AC from now forward. That's going to be our new hip lingo for anaerobic capacity here. So we'll start the workout again with that lunge matrix. This is now the 3rd time that we're going into this. So hopefully, that 3rd time's a charms kind of scenario with this, and where the calf thing is only going to be number 2 this week, but we're starting to really find some finesse with that. So saw plenty of comments. Feeling good, not beautifully graceful. Guess what? I'm in the same camp. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So it just takes repetition, 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 repetition. See what I did there? All right. Lunge matrix. Nice long warm up. So we took the warm up down to 10 minutes this week. I not so secretly would prefer to stay 15 just to really get your body nice and ready. So if you found that that you respond better after a little bit longer warm up, feel free to add extra 5 minutes in. We try to tie it up nice and pretty, make it an even 30-minute workout. But if you have 35 minutes, I would spend it on a little bit extra warm up time here. So when we go into the main set here, we're going 5x1 minute at anaerobic capacity. So this is our biggest amount of time yet. 1 minute at anaerobic capacity, 2 minutes down. So lengthy period of very vigorous activity, relatively, I would say, very generous recovery in that 2 minutes down. So we want to make sure we're hitting it really hard when we're hitting it, and then fully recovering during that 2 minutes. So we had a good question. We had many questions actually that kind of came up via the Facebook group, which typically we save for later, but I think here's actually the time to kind of talk about part of it, which is how do we choose that interval duration, especially per energy zone. And in this time in particular, we're talking about anaerobic capacity and the recovery time that goes with it. So reminder, the goal of these intervals is to be fast. We can quantify that with a pace number, and we've done so with your calculator, but the goal is really to work fast, not at a sprint, not at a dead sprint, but probably at about an 8.5 to 9 out of 10 on that RPE scale, a pace in which you could only hold for maybe a couple minutes maximum. So the interval duration, when we introduce that, has to be fairly manageable and able for everybody here, all of us, to be able to hit that pace and hold it for a period of time. The second that these things start to decelerate and deteriorate, we're losing the benefit of the workout. So when we introduce this as an energy zone, because this is not a type of training that actually many adult athletes are doing. It's something I very, very rarely see in the kind of larger body of athletes I work with, which doesn't make it not important. Actually, it makes it more important. More people should probably be doing it. But it does mean that we have to be thoughtful of how we introduce it. So we have to introduce it in, we'll call it little bite-sized pieces of 30 seconds, move to 40 seconds, move to a minute. So we're starting to build a little bit of resiliency to working at these high paces. The recovery on the flip side of the coin, we really need to make sure as best as possible that we're allowing enough time for you to get full recovery. Not full like back down on the couch, but full recovery that you're breathing, your heart rate is recovered so that you're ready and able to go after that next interval very hard again. So we're trying to match that based on the effort of the interval itself. So for a 30-second interval, you can actually recover fairly quickly because the length of the interval itself was not that extreme. 45 seconds, starting to get a little bit more difficult. By the time we get to a minute, that's a long interval at this pace. So it takes that extra time. You might not be able to get quite back there in just 60 seconds. So we're actually allowing 2 minutes for the recovery time to make sure that you can go all the way to level 10, which is the pace prescribed for this anaerobic capacity workout, and then take it as easy as you need on that 2 minute recovery and able to go back to that high level again. So backing off the pace of the kind of the key interval, our anaerobic capacity interval, in order to try to maintain your jog better or a higher pace range during your recovery is missing the benefit of the workout. We've got to take it to that high level, then we've got to recover fully and come back again. So this is all about quality over quantity. You want to make sure you're not sacrificing at all the quality of the set in order to complete the entirety of the workout. So hit each individual session or each individual interval as hard as you can within that range. It's once again not a sprint. You want to hit it to the level of your anaerobic capacity pace, and then don't worry about the next ones. You get across that bridge when you get there. So approach each one individually, give it a great effort, and then see how things are going over the scope of the workout. Remember, definite quality over quantity here. We'll loop back a little bit to that. Run number 2 of this week, 30-minute hill run. So second repetition through the 3D calf stretch here. A great one to prepare your body for this workout. I know we talked a little bit about it last week. Continue to practice this, continue to get good at it. It's going to be a great thing to have in your runner toolkit as you move along through your running career. So 10-minute warm-up inclusive of striders going into our 15-minute main set. So we're starting off 3 by 30. This is really, these are short. The intensity is still relatively high. These are primers. These are something we're now using to get ready for the longer intervals to follow. It's something you've done before, you hopefully are feeling fairly comfortable with, and we do them at the top of the workout to get ready for the second half of the workout. And the second half of the workout is this 4 by 130 at threshold. These are going to be, once again, high intensity intervals when you start to incorporate the resistance that an incline provides. So while we're operating at threshold pace, this is an effort that I would think feels a lot more like VO2 max. 90 seconds of VO2 max is plenty long. It's going to be a good heart pumping interval. Similarly to our anaerobic capacity work before, you want to take that recovery very, very seriously. You want to allow your body to come all the way back down so you're in control of your breathing, your heart rate is returned to an easy kind of jogging state so that you can go hard again. So this is a great way, just like our anaerobic capacity intervals again, or our AC intervals. I'm not even using my own term now. Our AC intervals, very similar, power generation, running form and efficiency, and both great ways to build speed. And this is, don't be confused, definitely a sneaky speed workout, Hill's speed work in disguise, that instead of going to that high intensity pace again, pulling the pace back a little bit, but increasing the difficulty with that resistance via incline. So it's actually a little bit less impact running uphill because that hill is actually a little bit higher. So the footfall is coming down a bit above your plant foot, reducing the impact, but getting the same intensity plus the posterior chain activation that we get from hill work. So it's our key run number 2 of next week. Run number 3, our long run, our 45-minute endurance run. Easy peasy. You can see we're not quite yet increasing the distance or duration of this workout. And that's not the point right now. We're putting our focus on our short, hard work that we're doing in the early part of the week. This is just a nice, easy run, a little bit longer to finish the week out. Hopefully the most fun, most relaxing run of the week. Make sure you walk away from the end of it knowing that you had more to give. Week 3 challenge, zoom to the top. So share a photo or story about how you're crushing your hill repeats. We'll pick our favorite, make sure to send a little Team Wilpers swag your way. We've loved the participation so far. Always enjoy checking out all your photos, so keep it coming. Make sure to tag at Team Wilpers Run Challenge, and hashtag Team Wilpers Run to participate. That hashtag is key to your success if you want some of this Team Wilpers gear, because it's how I sort through all of the challenges. So hashtag Team Wilpers Run. So some questions that came up via the group. So Julia asked some specific questions about the structure of the AC workouts, some of which I tried to touch on already, and some of which I will kind of reattempt to touch on now. So one of the questions was about how we add length week by week. And the part B was, what is that work to recovery ratio going for? And I kind of touched on this maybe more than I intended to earlier, but that 30, 45, we started at 30 seconds. And once again, it had to be something approachable that we could introduce and make sure people started to learn how to do it and do it. So we didn't want to push everybody outside of their comfort zone right at the top. A quote that I've completely stolen from one of our strength trainers, Ryan Hopkins, is he was like, I'd rather be a mile too short than an inch too far. And it's a philosophy company-wide that we use, or at least I use, and I know everybody else does as well. The last thing we want to do is push people too far too fast. So we always want to come in slowly, introducing this new stimulus bit by bit. As I talked about with recovery earlier, it's not always going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So it's not set like that, kind of set in stone like that. And as a matter of fact, I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, I meant to, is that if you need more time on these recoveries, so let's say we're going into this week ahead, we're going 1 minute on, 2 minutes off. If at 2 minutes your heart is still racing and you don't have your breathing, it's not the thing to do in these type of workouts to go right into the next set anyway and sacrifice that quality. What you want to do is actually take a little bit more recovery time, make sure your body is very physically ready and able to then attack that next set. In order to get the benefit, in order to get the pop from this, you really have to go at that level. Otherwise, when that form's deteriorating, when the heart rate is too high and you start to slow down, we're kind of moving to a different energy zone. So the recovery can even be a little bit malleable based upon how you're feeling during that day. So as I kind of mentioned earlier, for a 30-second interval, tough effort, relatively short, probably bounce back really quick. 1 minute interval, a lot longer. So we want to make sure to provide more time in order to recover from that. I would say the maximum amount of time we're ever going to spend in these intervals is 2 minutes, 2 minutes maximum. And that's for beginner athlete all the way to incredibly experienced runner, 2 minutes. The pace changes, so it's different kind of relative in that way, but the effort should stay relatively the same. So we want 2 minutes at that effort. And then we would do maybe a maximum of about 3 minutes rest off that 2 minutes. I like to keep my rests around 2 minutes tops. Otherwise, my heart rate starts to drop kind of below easy pace. So, but the recovery, once again, it's matched to the duration of the interval. But the goal of that recovery, which is the most important to each individual runner, is that you're fully recovering. So once again, if you need to take more recovery time in order to get a better quality of interval, absolutely do that. You are not only not shorting the workout, you are enhancing your workout by being able to go harder time after time after time and starting to, as opposed to starting to deteriorate in the quality of those intervals. Hopefully that answered some of those questions. If not, come at me again next week and we'll keep clarifying these a little bit. So Stephanie had a few questions also on AC intervals. And so she said she ran the AC intervals and felt that I had more in me. Should I increase the pace? And my initial thought on that is that I wouldn't. And the reason, as we've talked about here, is that we're increasing the duration as we go by week. So I wouldn't increase the pace quite yet. I would start to see how these things feel as we add longer and longer intervals. And the goal is to hit them all hard. So if you're hitting them all hard, that's outstanding. You don't necessarily need to add more intensity to it. Over the scope of an entire training week, these probably shouldn't, your actual time at rep probably shouldn't go over 5% of your total volume of time of complete training. So this is something you want to hit. It's kind of short, sweet, and you've got to really hit that pop. So take advantage of each little interval. And once again, if you're nailing them, outstanding. Let's see how things go as they get a little bit longer and a little bit longer. But what you don't want is at any point for these things to start deteriorating. And that's your form to fall apart, your cadence to break down. At that point, we're losing the benefit of the workout. You're also starting to do a little bit of potential, or we'll say you're opening the door for some potential tweaks and strains by kind of overdoing the interval. Kind of part B of this question was, I've had nagging pain in my Achilles. It's been on and off for a few years since I strained it. Any tips on dealing with that? So far I've rested, stretched the calves, and massaged the calves. So always, my number one caveat for lingering issues in particular, for lingering issues in particular, I would absolutely recommend to seek the advice of a sports PT who not only can push and prod your muscles a little bit, do that manual manipulation work, but also can kind of monitor the progress of it on an ongoing basis. Similarly, they're going to give you a prescriptive course of action of stuff you can do to continue to help improve the strength and health of that Achilles on that side. That being said, when I think about Achilles tightness or pain in general, there are the few things that come immediately to mind to work on it here in the meantime is calf flexibility, consistent and continual maintenance, and then overall lower leg strength. And so the things of that kind of flexibility, you're gonna be wanting to stretch the calf, and especially the low calf, very frequent, every day, sometimes maybe multiple times a day. Foam rolling the calf to try to get that thing open a little bit. And then potentially over the course of time, and this may or may not be a contributing issue at all, but it certainly is prevalent, is start to very, very slowly over the course of time move from a heeled shoe or an inclined shoe to a little bit of a flatter shoe. And this has to be an incredibly slow transition. And really the issue, we see this a lot of times, things have changed in the last 20 years or so, and especially when women were wearing a lot of high heels, but also happens with men's dress shoes, boots, etc. When the toe is below the heel, in essence, that Achilles starts to shorten over the length of time, and it gets a little bit compact. And so when you then transition to your running, a couple things happen. One, that Achilles has shortened, so it doesn't have the same range of motion. And if your running shoe has a lower drop than a heel, which would be very, very common in dress shoes and things of similar nature, you're then elongating or trying to elongate that Achilles, which is very, very dense. It's going to have a hard time stretching out in that way. So if this is potentially something that might be a contributing factor, what you're going to want to do is try very, very slowly transition your day-to-day footwear to a little bit flatter shoe to allow a little bit more range of motion and length in the Achilles itself. But once again, this is a very slow transition, and especially even in running shoes, you would take many, many months to make a transition from, let's say, like a 8mm or 10mm heel to a 4mm or a 0mm heel. And if you're running in one of those low millimeter heel shoes, they call them like a zero drop shoe now, is a 0mm heel to toe drop, and you're not particularly used to it, or your day-to-day shoes have a much higher heel than that, then probably the easiest, fastest thing to do to relieve that pain is just probably raise the heel a little bit on your running shoe. Love a minimal running shoe. Just takes a long, long time to get your body ready and used to it. So hopefully some of those things will start to resonate or hit. Otherwise, I'm going to loop back to number one and say that absolute best course of action is to seek the advice of a medical professional, sports PT. Make sure to get that thing checked out. And our final question from tonight came from Kate. She said, how do you improve on the hill workouts when outside? I find hitting the target paces when there is a hill involved to be very difficult. You and many others, I'm sure. And are there good stretches for the knee to do before and after a hill workout to make it not hurt? So I'm going to answer these in inverse order. So I'm sure as you're aware when you're asking this question, everyone knows you can't actually stretch the knee as just a hinge, so no muscles there to be stretched. However, in this particular issue and most others, I would say 99.5% of knee-related running issues have nothing at all to do with the knee. It's almost always pain that's originating from a tightness, instability, etc. elsewhere in the body. The knee is just where it gets kind of the brunt of it all. So what I would say on top of that is probably 90% of that amount of time, at least where I see knee pain originating from, is tight hips. So in advance of your runs, I would absolutely spend some time opening those hips up. Some very kind of easy stretches to do that would be figure 4. That can be done in a lounged or seated position, depending upon your comfort and flexibility. Pigeon pose, maybe for more advanced athletes, or not even advanced, more flexible athletes that are able to get into that position. Otherwise, whatever feels most comfortable is best. So opening up those hips and then opening up the hip flexors in just a gentle hip flexor stretch. Always with the little asterisk on a hip flexor stretch. That is a very easy position to make. If you watch a video of a hip flexor stretch, you see it, you're like, no problem, I can do that. Very hard to actually stretch the hip flexor itself. So you have to kind of move around in that position and find it. And once you find kind of that tight sore muscle, is really kind of settle in and let it kind of hang out for a bit. So just know, it's a little bit more than just making the shape, making it look good. You have to really kind of rock the pelvis a bit to find where that hip flexor is and make sure to start opening it up. And then finally, the best way to improve on hilly workouts. Not gonna like this one, but it's practice and repetition. The more often you do it, the better you're gonna get. So, we talked about sort of the reasons for doing it. The reasons are to get that running form, economy, power, posterior leg strength, posterior muscle activation. That's all the stuff that happens. It doesn't happen after one time. It happens after repetition after repetition after repetition after repetition. And over the course of days, weeks, and months, you start to see changes and modifications to your physiology that's going to allow that to be a lot more comfortable. However, a couple little tips in the meantime is that you want to shorten your stride, focus on turnover. If you have low turnover going uphill, incredibly difficult. You have to get your legs moving, pumping a little bit more often because you don't have the distance for a long stride. So high turnover. Keep your head up. The second head comes down, shoulders go down, arms go down, you're slowing down. Everything comes up, shoulders come back, head opens up, you're much more economical, head up. Depending on the actual hill itself, doesn't have to be the top of the hill. If it's a very steep hill, that's probably too much. You're not supposed to be looking towards the sky, but fairly neutral, looking a little bit up the hill. And finally, kind of third piece of advice there, bring the arms into the party. Those arms should be pumping. And they shouldn't be up like this. These are treadmill arms. Got to be down. You want your hands. I had a running coach once tell me, think of your fingers. It's like holding a Lay's potato chip between your thumb and forefinger. And that you got a drum on either side of your hips. And as you're coming up, you're swinging and you're hitting the drum. But you could, sprinters, really strong track athletes will have sore arms at the end of their event. And that's from using that arm drive to create so much momentum. So we can incorporate that into our endurance work, but especially into hill work. Bring those arms into the party, really try to pump them and get some momentum generated to help carry you up that hill. Well, ladies and gents, that is all here for week 2. I hope everyone has an incredible rest of the week, an amazing week 3, and I'll see you back here next week. Have a great one.